Hi, and welcome to Lesson 4 of Magic the Gathering 101, a video guide for people who want to learn Magic. In this video, you'll learn about the basics of what happens during a player's turn.
Before we get into what happens during a turn, we need to cover some basic vocabulary for different places or zones of the game. Your library is your deck of cards that is placed face down and off to one side. It's where you draw cards from.
Your hand is, well, the cards in your hand.
The battlefield is the space between you and your opponent. It's where you play lands, creatures, or other permanents like artifacts and planeswalkers.
There's your graveyard. This is where creatures go when they die, and where instants and sorceries go after you cast them. If one of your permanents gets destroyed, it goes to the graveyard.
Finally, there's Exile. It's a little different from the graveyard. Some spells will exile creatures instead of destroy them, or sometimes spells exile themselves, so that's why we need this separate zone. Don't worry about it too much. A card will tell you if something needs to go to exile. It's most important to know that exile is separate from the graveyard.
At the beginning of your turn, the first thing you'll do is untap all of your tapped permanents. That can mean lands, creatures, artifacts, or even planeswalkers. This is called your untap step.
Next, you're going to draw a card for your turn. One important exception is if you're taking the very first turn of the entire game. The player who goes first does not draw a card on their first turn, but they will draw a card during all of their other turns. Unsurprisingly, this is called your draw step.
After drawing your card, you have an opportunity to play your land for the turn and to cast any spells. This is your first main phase. Remember, to cast a spell, you'll tap your lands for mana, then use that mana to cast your spell. You don't have to tap all your lands for mana every turn, just tap as much as you need.
Next comes combat. During combat, you'll attack with any creatures you want to attack with, and your opponent has the opportunity to block with their own untapped creatures. After attackers and blockers are declared, damage happens. Combat is a tricky step, so check back later to learn about it in more detail.
After combat, you'll have another main phase. It's another chance to play a land, though keep in mind that you can only play one land per turn, so if you played one during your first main phase, you don't get to play a second, and to cast any spells.
After that, your turn is done and it's time to pass it back to the player across from you.